This actually picks up very neatly from what we were talking about last week, which is essentially about understanding your energy bills. And there are energy bills and there are energy bills. Well, this session intends over the next half an hour or so to go into just a little bit more depth to understand more about what our energy consumption looks like, the shape of it, what we can do with data, how we visualize it, and I suppose quite critically how we manage it so that we can actually get even further down the road to being zero carbon. So what I'll do is I'll hand over now to Nick. So if you'd like to just kick off a bit and talk us through some of the key elements of what all this means from a data provision point of view. How do we get hold of the data? What does it look like? How about those for starting points?
Okay, yeah, sure. Good place to start. So last session we talked about the bill. We talked about tracking certain things within that bill. We talked about, one of the things that we mentioned was the shape of the energy, and we also talked about the DCDA, which was the data collection data aggregator. So those will be expanded on in this session. So really the first point to start off with is granularity is the key here to achieving a reduction of energy usage, ultimately reducing how much you're then spending on the energy usage, and overall reducing the carbon output that your business puts into the environment. So we talked last week about half-hourly data that would come from a half-hourly meter. The meter classes 05 through to 08, as we touched on. That's pretty much baked in, so you will already have some output of half-hourly data from those meter types. If you don't have a half-hourly meter, so if you're on a non-half-hourly, or you may have a smart meter, then potentially you can get access to increased granularity of data through some sort of online data portal.
Okay, and how do I go about doing that? Do I contact my supplier or a data collector? How do I actually get hold of this stuff?
I would say your first point of call would be the supplier. Have a chat with the supplier. All suppliers offer some form of data visualization you should find. Again, that may be an app-based data visualization package, or it could be an online portal. You can also talk to your TPI, your third-party intermediary or broker, as some people may call them, who would perhaps be able to access this level of detail for you or on your behalf, or you can go directly to the data collector that's responsible for pulling your data out of your half-hourly meters.
Well, thanks very much for that. Okay, so I suppose what does our data look like when we finally get hold of it then?
Again, it will vary depending on the format that you're using to interrogate that data. So it could be that you have a string of numbers that comes to you in a CSV style format that you could then plow into an Excel spreadsheet, and then with some sort of home written macros, you could potentially get that to work out something that's meaningful that you can use. It's a little bit beyond my gift, to be honest, but I have a lot of intelligent people in the business at Bryt that interpret that data for us, which we then can feed back to customers. That's at a very sort of basic level. It depends really what you're trying to achieve by interpreting this data. So I think this may be a good point to share my screen, show you what a day profile would look like for half-hourly consumption.
Okay, that'd be very helpful. Yes.
This is anonymized, so we're not breaching anything here, and it's just a very very generic display of data. So here you should be seeing a daily profile, as we call it, or a shape of consumption in a generic business. In this case, it was taken last week. In fact, it's Thursday, 10th of September. And you can see starting from half midnight through to the end of the day, there are peaks and troughs for where the data is being consumed. So in this particular example, we can see that things sort of ramp up in the early hours of the morning. There's a lift from the kind of base load, if you like, that sort of starts at midnight. 6:30, there appears to be an uplift. And I would imagine that's where people are actually coming into this business. Things are happening, like machines are spinning up, lights are going on. Let's not forget the impact of kettles also when people are having their brews. And this is your starting point, if you like. Once you move beyond the level of data that you would get from a bill, because that in and of itself is data. You know, it's a cost for a month or a quarter. It's a snapshot in time. When you get into this sort of day-on-day level, you can start seeing where things are happening. And the key thing here is establish your baseline. Work out what your business looks like during peak operational hours, and then work out what it looks like when everybody has gone home and everything is switched off. And then from there, you can start to drill down.
I think it's an interesting point, actually, because it's very instructive to notice, and I think we commented on this last time out, is that to establish the baseline, as it were, as in when there's nothing happening, there is still a significant amount of energy use. So, you know, that could give you opportunities to go further and look at what is actually, you know, using the juice when actually there's nobody in, and as Nick has just said before, the kettles are turned on and so on. So, okay, so that gives us a daily profile. So, so what else should I be looking at next?
I think once again, it's your snapshot in time. You've got your baseline. You can look into, well, where do we go from here? This is a Thursday. What does it look like on a Monday? What does it look like over the weekend? So the next slide that I'll share with you shows 2 weeks. And this one's quite interesting because you can see where the daily operations are. You can see that it would appear, certainly for the second week, that Wednesday has a spike. So there's definitely something happening in that second week around the top point here. But interestingly, over the weekend, where you would expect nothing to be taking place, really, almost your standby operation, you do have these 2 spikes that occur on the Saturday and the Sunday. So again, if I was running this business, I'd be trying to understand, where does that come from? What's driving that spike? Could it be security on site and they're doing a patrol? Could it be you've got a large backup of your IT systems taking place and your server and your data hubs? You know, but it's understanding. Once you see it, once you visualize it, you can then ask questions about it and drill down.
Yeah, it's interesting that spike, or those 2 spikes, appear to be replicated the following week, and there's certainly something going on in the background there, as you point out. I think it's one of the more useful elements of this kind of exercise is actually to try and spot problems before they become big problems. You know, there may be all sorts of things going on, you know, faulty machinery and all sorts
Absolutely,
of things.
yeah. It could be some sort of intermittent machinery fault. It could be something kicking in standby, booting up from a standby mode that's automated that you've not realized. It could be the boiler coming on because it's on a timed program and firing up if you don't actually have anybody in. You know, just switch off those sequences on the Saturday and the Sunday, and save yourself, you know, time, money, and the impact on the environment.
Right, and John, thank you very much, has very helpfully pointed out that actually, if you can get hold of the data, then he says that Christmas Day is quite a good one just to establish, you know, it's pretty much you know, nailed on cert. There's going to be nothing happening. So if you really want to know your absolute bottom line, or your absolute baseline, sorry, then maybe that's the day to pick if you can actually get hold of that. But let's go with this. This is September. So okay, so there's some interesting observations there. So okay, where does that lead us then if we want to look at, say, that data, that information in, say, a little bit more detail?
It leads to a couple of things, really. I would recommend. So I would say once you've got this level of detail, you can look at seasonal trends. So if you find that you are going to have a particularly busy period as you ramp up. Say, you're a business that has a retail presence that drives up in Christmas. You can budget accordingly for your energy bill, so you don't have this bill shock when it comes through. You can already spend your summer months, preparing for that, working out where your efficiencies are based on these graphs, and making your savings in that run through. But I would say by far more important in terms of priority, it's great to get this data. It's great to interpret it. The techies amongst us would love this sort of data and granularity. It's actually making this come alive for your staff, for your team, for your colleagues. A lot of the changes here, you can sit behind your spreadsheet and say, right, I need to reduce that spike. But unless you actually get people on board with you, that change isn't really going to happen if it's the simple stuff like, looking when you're putting the kettles on, looking when you're, turning off the equipment on your way out. That will only come with an engagement piece as well.
Yeah, I think that reinforces the point that we made last week as well, which is that actually having staff on board really actually makes the whole thing happen, and it's also responsibility. It's as I said, as we said last week, if it's nobody's job to do it, then it doesn't get done. So this has to be delegated, and it has to be seen as part of the overall business management function. It has to be somebody's responsibility, because at the end of it, this is a cost. This is contributing to your business bottom line. So not to manage it is an oversight, and a fairly major one. So yes, so we cannot discount the importance of behaviour change on this.
Absolutely.
I think most of us these days are, we kind of get it. So how do we do it? So this is just one way of engaging with people. And data visualization is so much easier, rather than just say, here's a spreadsheet. Okay, let's look at what it actually looks like. Shapes are much more powerful. Okay, so sermon over. Next point then, Nick, please, if we can move on. What do we do next then?
Well, we talked about measuring these things. We talked about establishing a baseline. Another graph that I think may be useful to share at this point is when you look at day on day, and you, as you said, shapes are very powerful. So here's a comparison by day of week in a line graph format. It takes it away from those blocks and those columns that we were looking at, and it shows energy consumption for every given Thursday. And again, you can see, is there anything happening differently? So in this example here, Thursday, the 6th of August, which is the light blue line, although overall it matches the shape of the previous Thursdays, is a much lower baseline. In fact, there's a spike here, a more pronounced downward spike at 6:30. So, you'd be questioning, what did we do on that day to reduce our consumption at that level? Was it as simple as 6th of August? A lot of people were on holiday. Was it you hadn't had an order in at that point? Your orders tend to come towards the end of the month. But it's this type of detail that will really help you get control of your business, understand what's going on, and make those savings and efficiencies.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? That an apparently similar day will have a remarkable range of variation. I mean, the other days seem to match more or less, but that particular Thursday does really stick out as being quite different. So you're quite right. So what does that mean from a business point of view? What are we doing differently? And if it's a particularly good thing, how do we replicate it? Because it's quite possible that other days of the week will have similar kind of shapes.
Well, it may seem like a small amount, when you talk in terms of kilowatt hours, and typically your bill will be an element of pence per kilowatt hour, and there's a difference there of 64 kilowatt hours being consumed between Thursday the 6th and then the next highest point, which was Thursday the 20th of August. But that's still, depending on what your bill is, that could be 3 pence, 5 pence, depending on how much you're paying there. And that's for a given day. So when you stack that up across the period of a month, you're quickly into the realms of saving significant amounts. And if you're a higher consuming site, so bear in mind this is a fairly low consuming example that we have here, but if you're a higher consuming industrial site, that's a significant saving that you can make.
Absolutely, I think it isn't significant, as you say. Certainly in the metalworking industries, where energy bills of $250,000, $500,000 upwards are not uncommon, then even a 5% saving is actually still a fairly significant number. So, yeah, I think it's a fair thing to point out. Okay, so how about looking then? In that case, we've gone through our by week. How about what happens next in that case? Where do we go from there?
I think, as we've already touched on, you look at your higher consuming periods where your operation will currently ramp up for either production windows or bums on seats if you're an office-based environment. Look at ways that you can reduce that impact. Can you move your operation? We already touched on it, to avoid the high consumption times, your winter weekdays that will fall between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., the kind of red zones, if you like. Okay. And really look at ways that you use this data to drive a sort of seed change in the way that you operate and the way that your colleagues, your employees think about energy consumption, the cost, both financially and to the environment. I think
John's also raised a very good point as well, which is that if you do make some kind of changes within the organisation, such as one of the most common things that we come across is businesses that take out old fluorescent tubes and put in swanky new LED lights, you would expect to see a drop in energy consumption, and a fairly significant one. So it's also part of the feedback mechanism that says if we do this, which is taken as a good thing, is that reflected in reduced running costs, which is half the point of doing it.
Yeah.
And so again, that's another motivational factor. So people can actually see the difference and they can put a number on it.
I think I quoted this last week, but the Bayes report suggested that 30 to 40% of all of the energy that goes into a business is wasted. It doesn't actually go to running your business and delivering on your profits. So absolutely, if you're making those changes to ensure that you're using your energy efficiently, you want to be able to track that back. You want to be able to demonstrate a return on that investment.
Absolutely vital. Okay, so. Nick, any particularly good stories that you've got that relate to anomalies in energy use, for example?
One that springs to mind is a case study that took place at a school. So initially, this was so that the children could engage with the impact that energy has on the environment, and to adopt that sustainability mindset. It was also there to drive efficiencies for the school as well. Schools, as I'm sure you're aware, often they can be old buildings, quite cavernous, cost a lot to heat them. So case study took place, and it ran for the entirety of the year. And one of the things that the school found out was when their on-site caretaker was taking his holidays, energy consumption went down. Now, this could lead to the question of, well, what was the caretaker doing during their time there, which I think would be the start point. But what it actually highlighted was the standing caretaker, if you like, the locum that had been provided by the local authority, wasn't actually turning up, wasn't doing the job, wasn't patrolling the school and making sure that it was safeguarded in the way that the living caretaker did. So it highlighted something, and data is great. It can lead to a lot of learnings and understandings, but in this particular case, I think it highlighted the need for a different standing caretaker to make sure that business as usual continued. great thing is the kids all engage with it as well, you know, and if you can capture the hearts and minds at that point, you already have people that are, you know, coming out into a workforce where they are looking, and I think again we touched on this last week, they're looking for their employers to be actively engaged in sustainability, and that's one of the deciding factors that they new entrants into the workforce will look at. They'll look at your websites and they'll look at what your credentials are, and they will take that on board when they choose whether they want to join your business and bring their talent along or not.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what else do we need to cover off? I mean, in terms of things like, I think we've touched on a whole lot of areas about reducing costs, but one of the things I noticed that I think you mentioned as well with the duos payments. This comes from the bill information we had last week, and the so-called red periods and things like that. So presumably being able to, you know, identify where consumption is, then
and you know, currently that is a factor. We touched on TCR last week. I'm not going to go over that again, but if you want to look at our webinar for last week, we went into TCR in quite a degree of depth. The essence of this is, you know, you can move your operation to a point where you will not be exposed to a massive charge. Typically, you know, the triad, as it's referred to, is a period that is occurs during the 3 highest half-hourly periods of the winter, and that will have a charging factor. But absolutely, you know, this level of data helps you run your operation in a way that can avoid these transmission costs at the highest periods. I think it may be worth us talking, because I'm aware that we have time and we probably want to answer some questions as well, just about how you get access to it. I think we've touched on it loosely. Your starting point, as I mentioned, is your supplier. There may be a cost associated with that. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Again, have that conversation with your supplier. It's probably just an element within your supply contract. Same with if you're using a TPI. You know, just double check that what you need from this data is available with the service that they provide. Alternatively, as we mentioned, go to your DCDA. They can be very helpful in that respect. Typically, you'll get a lot of support if you are a large industrial operator, or you have a degree of multi-sites out there. If you're a smaller operator, then perhaps your supplier is your best port of call. If you're on a half-hourly meter, you'll have all of this data. If you're not on a half-hourly meter, you will need to look for a supplier that has a great app or a great web platform that actually gives you this granularity, because not all of them are equal.
Right. Okay, that's really helpful to know as well in that case. And also, and John, thank you very much again, John, for your contribution. Most welcome. And John poses the question: Can we understand, or can the data show us if the supply capacity is about right? Will this also show up discrepancies in that, and how do we manage that?
It should do. I mean, the data that you've got here is kilowatt hours as opposed to kVA. So, but it gives you a starting point. So you would know what's coming in. You would then have an understanding of the amount of energy that's coming into your site, and is that then balanced at the right point for the agreement that you've entered into in your contract?
Sure.
For your supply capacity.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Well, I think that's been very comprehensive. Is there anything else we'd like to add to this at all, or do you think we've covered all the key points for the moment? Anything else from you, Nick?
No, I think, you know, we've touched on it. I could evangelize about the fact that this won't just save you money; it will also save the environment. You know, sustainability is a key factor, but even if you're just looking at it from a purely financial point of view, if you're reducing your carbon output, then there can be cost savings associated with that, as we touched on with the climate charge levy, and looking at getting yourself a CCA, you know, an agreement that you will make steps to reduce the carbon output of your business, that could see a reduction in you paying your CCL charge. So it's not just about hearts and minds and saving the environment. It is about saving money for your business and being more cost effective.
Absolutely, I think that is an important message actually, which is that it's actually doing the right thing and being rewarded for doing the right thing in lots of different ways. It's not just the direct costs, but there's the other on costs, as you point out. There's the CCL and so forth. So there's a lot of other things embedded, as again we talked about last week in the bill, that a lot of businesses are perhaps not even aware of. So and also I think just before we go, we've got time for a question or a point here, and this is again, thank you very much, John, which is half-hourly data can be useful for building a case for solar PV, I believe. Is this correct?
Absolutely, and that's a very nice teaser for session 3, I think, in terms of renewable energy. But yes, absolutely. You can look at where your business usage is, drawing down sort of on-site generation and storage, and really building that into a business case that would make that a compelling argument.
Yeah, I think that's an important point as well, and not just generating energy, but certainly energy storage, which has come on leaps and bounds in terms of capacity and cost reduction, is now a viable proposition for quite a lot of businesses. And so again, okay, well, we'll save that for the webinar for next week. So hopefully that's a useful teaser. And okay, if we don't have any more comments or questions, Nick, are you done? Or is there any final comments you'd like to throw in? Apart from
no, I think we've covered it. This is a fairly straightforward topic. It's what gets measured gets done, doesn't it? So if you have levels of data available that are granular and really meaningful, use them, engage with your colleagues and your employees so that they're on this journey with you, and yeah, you can really make some great savings there.
Yeah, and that actually is, it's true. It's the same as other kind of business dashboards. The visualization capacity these days means that instead of staring at screens of numbers, like in days of yore, being able to see patterns and anomalies and so forth makes it leap off the page, and it's nice and easy to spot these days.
Yeah.
Which is one of the beauties of the current systems. Okay, folks. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for your time today. And I hope everybody has found this useful. And if you do wish to have any more information from ourselves at the Low Carbon team or from Nick and the team at Bryt Energy, then please get in touch and we'll be quite happy to help out. And as I say, John will be picking up webinar 3 next week, which will be talking about renewable energy. What does that mean for your business? What's the business case? What can it do for you? And so forth. So thanks very much again, everybody, for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.